I still remember the sound of that rocking chair. Even now, sitting in my kitchen at 6 in the morning with a cup of cold coffee in my hands, I can hear it. A slow, gentle creak, back and forth, like a heartbeat that never really stopped. My wife, Margaret, she loved that chair more than almost anything in this world. She used to sit in it every single evening after dinner, right there in the corner of our son Daniel's old bedroom, knitting or just looking out the window at the maple tree in the backyard. She said it helped her think. She said it was the only place in the whole house where the world got quiet enough for her to hear herself. I bought that chair for her 31 years ago, saved up for 3 months. Back then, I was working double shifts at the plant, and we didn't have much. But Margaret had seen it in a little antique shop on 5th Street, and she had touched the armrest so gently, like it was something sacred, and I knew. I just knew. She passed away 4 years ago, breast cancer. 18 months from diagnosis to the day I sat next to her bed and held her hand while she left this world. After she was gone, I moved that rocking chair into Daniel's old room, not because I couldn't look at it, but because it felt right. That room still smelled a little like her perfume, and the chair belonged there in the quiet, where things are still and soft. I never thought anyone would look at that chair and see a price tag. I never thought my own family would make me feel like I needed to defend it. But then came Thanksgiving, and then came Serena, and everything changed. Let me tell you a little about myself, because I think it matters. My name is Harold Eugene Bates. I'm 67 years old. I live alone in the same house where I raised my son, in a small town in Ohio that most people have never heard of. The house isn't fancy. It's a 3-bedroom colonial with a leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom that I keep meaning to fix, and a front porch that sags a little on the left side. But it's mine, paid off. Every nail and board paid for with honest work and honest years. I worked at the Kellerman manufacturing plant for 38 years. Started on the floor as a line worker when I was 22, worked my way up to shift supervisor, and retired 5 years ago with a decent pension and a clock they gave me at the retirement party that I keep on the mantel next to Margaret's photo. Daniel is my only child. He's 34 now. He was a good boy growing up, quiet like his mother. He got a business degree from the State University, moved to Columbus, and made a decent life for himself. We were close, talked on the phone every Sunday. He visited on holidays. I was proud of him. Then he met Serena. I want to be fair here. I want to be honest. When Daniel first brought Serena home to meet me, about 2 years ago, I tried to see the best in her. She was pretty, polished, confident. She had a way of walking into a room like she already owned it. She worked in real estate, or at least she had, before what I later found out was a string of business failures and bad decisions I knew nothing about at the time. She called me Harold right away, never Mr. Bates, never even tried. She looked around my house that first visit with the kind of eyes that don't see a home. They see square footage, they see assessed value, they see what things are worth on a market somewhere. I noticed, but I said nothing. Margaret always said I was too quiet, too willing to let things pass. Harold, she used to tell me, silence is patience, but sometimes people mistake it for permission. I should have remembered that sooner. Daniel and Serena got engaged last spring. He called me on a Sunday to tell me, and his voice was so happy that I pushed my worries down deep and told him I was thrilled. And part of me was, I wanted my son to be happy. I wanted him to have what Margaret and I had, a partner, a real one, someone who would sit in a rocking chair with him at the end of long days and make the world feel smaller and safer. I just wasn't sure Serena was that person, but I stayed quiet, and I kept hoping I was wrong. Thanksgiving was the test. Daniel said he wanted to bring Serena and her mother, a woman named Patricia, to spend the holiday at my house. He said it would be a chance for us all to really come together as a family. He sounded nervous when he asked, and that should have told me something. I said yes. I cleaned the whole house. I ordered a 20-pound turkey. I baked Margaret's sweet potato pie from the handwritten recipe card she kept tucked in the kitchen drawer, the one with a little grease stain on the corner from the first time she ever made it. I was ready. I wanted it to go well. It did not go well. They arrived at noon on Thursday. Daniel came in first and hugged me at the door the way he always does, with both arms tight. He smelled like the same aftershave he's worn since he was 18. For a second, standing there in my doorway with my son's arms around me, everything felt fine. Then Serena walked in. She was wearing a cream-colored blazer and heels to Thanksgiving dinner. At my house, she looked around the living room the way a building inspector looks at a property, slow and deliberate, making small mental notes. Her mother, Patricia, was behind her, a thin woman in her 50s with painted nails and a tight smile. She shook my hand like she was doing me a favor. "Harold," Serena said, not hello, not happy Thanksgiving, just my name like a starting point. "The house is cozy." That pause before cozy carried a lot of weight. "Thank you," I said. "Come on in." Dinner was at 2. In between, they sat in the living room, and I finished up in the kitchen. I could hear their voices, low and occasional. At one point, I heard Patricia say something about comparable sales in this area, and Serena respond with a number that made me set down the ladle. She was talking about my house, about what it would sell for. I picked up the ladle. I kept cooking. Dinner itself started well enough. The turkey came out the way Margaret taught me, golden and crisp on the outside. I'd made green beans and stuffing and the sweet potato pie. Daniel helped me carry things to the table and told me it all smelled amazing. And for a moment I saw the boy I raised, the one who used to stand on a step stool beside his mother and steal spoonfuls of pie filling when she wasn't looking. We sat down. I said grace. I thanked God for the food and for the company, and silently for the memory of the woman who had sat at this table for so many years. For a while, we just ate. Then Patricia asked about the house. How long had I lived here? What the property taxes were like? Whether I'd done any renovations recently? I answered calmly, "It's an old house. Taxes are manageable. The kitchen was updated about 12 years ago. You should really think about updating the bathrooms," Serena said. "Buyers care a lot about bathrooms. I'm not planning on selling," I said. A small silence. "Well," she said, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes, "plans change." I let it go. After dinner, while Daniel and I were doing dishes, Serena and Patricia wandered through the house the way guests sometimes do. I could hear their footsteps overhead, in the upstairs hallway, and then I heard a door open, the door to Daniel's old room. I don't know why, but my hands went still in the soapy water. I heard Serena's voice, muffled through the ceiling but clear enough. A short sentence, then a little laugh, then Patricia's voice, agreeing about something Daniel didn't notice. He was telling me about a project at work. I dried my hands slowly. A few minutes later, they came back downstairs. Serena walked into the kitchen, looked directly at me, and said it. "Harold, I have to ask, why do you have that old rocking chair up in the child's room? I looked it up while I was up there. That style of antique Windsor rocker in that condition is worth at least $7,000 on the resale market right now." I felt something tighten in my chest. "That was Margaret's chair," I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. "I know," Daniel told me, "but it's just sitting there gathering dust. $7,000 sitting in an empty room." She tilted her head. "That seems like a waste, don't you think?" Daniel looked at me. He looked uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything. "It's not a waste," I said quietly. "Well, to each their own, I guess," she said lightly. Then she sat back down at the table and helped herself to another piece of pie, like the conversation was already over. But it wasn't over. Not even close. After dessert, when we were all back in the living room with coffee, Serena set down her cup, folded her hands, and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as prepared. She had been working up to something all day. I understood that now. "Harold," she said, "I want to talk to you about something serious." Patricia straightened slightly on the couch. Daniel looked at the floor. "I'm listening," I said. "Daniel and I are in a difficult financial situation. I made some investments over the past couple of years that didn't pan out the way I expected, and I have some significant debt. Business debt. Personal debt? It's substantial." She paused. I waited. "We've looked at all our options, and honestly, Harold, the most straightforward solution is your house." I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just looked at her. "This house is worth somewhere between $280,000 and $300,000 based on current comps in the area. If you sold it and gave Daniel his share of the inheritance early, it would clear our debt completely and give us a fresh start." The room was very quiet. "This is my home," I said. "You're 67. You live alone. You don't need all this space. You could get a nice apartment, somewhere easier to maintain. I've actually looked at some one-bedroom places nearby that would be perfect for Serena." Daniel's voice, quiet but tight. "I'm just being practical, Daniel. Someone has to be." I looked at my son. He was staring at the carpet. His jaw was working like he was chewing on something he couldn't swallow. "Daniel," I said softly, "did you know she was going to ask me this today?" He looked up. His eyes were pained. "Dad, she told me she wanted to talk to you about our situation, but I didn't know she was going to." He knew. Serena said smoothly, "We talked about it. We're a team." That word, team, used like a wall to hide behind. I looked at her steadily. "Serena, I'm not selling my house. Harold, this is the house where I raised my son, where my wife lived and died, where 35 years of our life happened. I'm not selling it to pay off debts I had no part in creating." Serena's face changed. The polished, reasonable mask slipped. Just a little, but enough. "That's a very selfish way to look at it," she said. "Is it? Your son needs help. Your future daughter-in-law needs help. And you're sitting here clinging to a house and an old rocking chair like they're more important than your own family." And there it was. That's the sentence right there. The one that landed like a stone in still water and sent rings outward in every direction. I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "I think you should know something about that rocking chair, Serena." I stood up slowly. "My knees don't love me the way they used to. Come with me," I said. I walked upstairs. I didn't look back to see if they were following. I just walked. I heard their footsteps behind me on the stairs, all four of them, Daniel, Serena, Patricia, and the old house, creaking gently under our weight the way old houses do. I opened the door to Daniel's room. The rocking chair was in the corner, just like always, next to the window where the afternoon light came through and made it look almost golden. There was a small quilt draped over the arm, one of the last ones Margaret made. I stood beside it and put my hand on the backrest. "Your grandmother made that quilt," I said to Daniel. He nodded. His eyes were soft and wet. "Margaret sat in this chair every day for almost 20 years, I said. "She sat in it when she was pregnant with Daniel and her back hurt too much to lie down. She sat in it when Daniel was sick as a little boy, and she would rock him to sleep while she hummed to him. She sat in it alone in the evenings near the end when she was tired but couldn't sleep." I was quiet for a moment. "The last time she sat in this chair, she called me up here. I sat on the edge of the bed right there, and she rocked slowly, and she talked to me for 2 hours about her life, about our life together, about Daniel, about the things she was grateful for and the things she hoped for him." I looked at Serena. She also told me something that night that I never shared with anyone, because I thought it would stay between her and me. I reached under the seat of the rocking chair. On the underside of the seat, Fixed there with a small piece of old cloth tape was a folded envelope. It had been there for 4 years. I had known it was there. I had never opened it. I looked at Daniel. "She put this here a few days before she died," I said. "She told me it was for you. She said you would know when it was time to read it. She said I would know too." Daniel's face crumpled. Just for a second. Then he pressed his lips together and held himself together the way men do when they are fighting very hard not to fall apart. "I think," I said quietly, "it's time." I held out the envelope. Daniel crossed the room and took it from me with both hands, like it was something fragile and irreplaceable. Because it was. He sat on the edge of the bed, in the exact same spot where I had sat 4 years ago, and he opened the envelope. The room was so quiet I could hear the maple tree outside moving in the November wind. Daniel unfolded the letter. He read it silently. His shoulders started to shake about halfway through. Serena took a step forward. "Daniel, what does it stop?" His voice was different, harder. "Please, just stop." He read to the end. Then he sat there with the letter in his hands, looking at nothing, for a long moment. Patricia was watching from the doorway. Her expression had shifted from calculating to uncertain. I waited. Finally, Daniel looked up at me. His eyes were red. "Dad," he said, "did you know what she wrote?" "She told me the general shape of it," I said. "Not the exact words." He nodded slowly. Then he looked at Serena. "Mom knew," he said. His voice was very controlled, very deliberate. "She knew about you. I should explain. Margaret was a quiet woman, but she was not an unobservant one. In the last months of her life, when she was declining, and people around her thought she wasn't paying attention, she was paying very close attention." Daniel had been dating someone before Serena, a young woman named Claire, who had come to visit Margaret in the hospital twice and had sat by her bed and held her hand and talked to her for hours. Margaret had loved Claire, but Daniel and Claire had broken up, and Margaret had worried about the kind of person Daniel might find next. She had also been contacted, in those last weeks, by a woman she described only as a voice from your future, a phrase she used in the letter that made Daniel go very still when he read it. It turned out that someone who knew Serena, an old colleague, a woman who had worked with her in real estate, had somehow found my wife. A mutual connection somewhere. This woman had reached out to warn Margaret about Serena, who had apparently already had a serious relationship before Daniel that ended badly, partly due to financial manipulation. Margaret had written all of this down. She hadn't wanted to interfere. She had known Daniel needed to find his own way. But she had written it down, sealed it, and left it under that chair like a message in a bottle, to be found when the time was right. She had also written something else. She had written about the house. She had written that the house was not just Harold's home, but Harold's dignity. That a man's home is the record of his life. That whoever would ask Harold to sell that house did not understand what love is, what sacrifice is, or what it means to belong somewhere. She had written, "Daniel, if someone ever asks your father to give up this house, look carefully at why. A person who sees only money in the places where love lived is a person who has never truly loved anything." When Daniel read those words aloud, he needed to, I think. He needed to say them out loud to make them real. Serena's face went absolutely white. "Not pale white, she's talking about me," Serena said, and for the first time all day her voice was small. "She didn't know you," Daniel said, "but yeah, she is." What happened next, I am going to tell you as honestly and fairly as I can. Serena tried to defend herself. She said it wasn't fair to be judged by a letter written by a woman who had never met her. She said she was only trying to be practical. She said that their financial situation was real and serious, and that someone in this family needed to face hard truths. Patricia backed her up. She said things about modern relationships requiring compromise and that I was being sentimental. I let them speak. I stood by the rocking chair with my hand on the backrest, and I let them say everything they needed to say. And then Daniel stood up. He wasn't loud. He didn't yell. He was, in that moment, more like his mother than I have ever seen him. "Serena," he said, "I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to tell me the truth." She looked at him. Her chin lifted. "The debt you have, the business debts. Who owes them? Is it both of us, or is it you?" A pause. "Some of the accounts are in both our names, but who took out the loans?" Another pause, longer this time. "The primary borrower on most of them is me," she said. "But I made those decisions for us, for our future. You made those decisions," he said quietly, before I knew they existed. "I found out about most of them 3 months ago. I told myself it didn't matter because we were going to be married and we'd figure it out together. But I didn't really figure it out. I just tried not to look at it." He looked down at the letter in his hands. "You brought me here today to help you convince my father to sell his house, and I let you because I thought if I just kept the peace, things would work out. Daniel." My mother is sitting in this letter warning me about exactly this, and I almost let it happen. He turned to me. "Dad, I'm sorry. Those 2 words, Lord, those 2 words. I had to look out the window at the maple tree for a minute. I had to buy myself a moment. You don't owe me an apology. I said, you're here now, that's what matters. I should have, Daniel." I looked at him. "I know, and I know you didn't understand what you were walking into today, so just let that go." He nodded. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand like he was 12 years old again. Serena watched this, and something moved across her face that was complicated and hard to read. Not quite shame, not quite anger, something in between, still searching for which direction to go. "I think," she said slowly, "that this family has some issues with including me." And that was the moment. That was when I understood who Serena really was. Not evil, not calculating in the way of a person who knows exactly what they are, but someone who genuinely could not see past her own needs, someone who looked at a room full of grief and love and history and saw only obstacles. I felt more sad for her than angry in that moment. I truly did. "Serena," I said, and I made sure my voice was gentle, "you're welcome in this family. You have been from the first day Daniel brought you here, but this house is my home. That rocking chair held my wife while she was dying. The letter she left in it held our son's heart in her hands even after she was gone. These are not things with a price. These are things with a story." She was quiet. "No one will ever ask you to sell the things that hold your story," I said. "I only ask the same in return." Patricia, sitting in the doorway, made a small sound. I looked at her. Her eyes were shining in a way they hadn't been before. She looked away. They left before dinner was even fully cleaned up. Serena and Patricia gathered their things quietly. There wasn't a dramatic exit. There wasn't another argument. Serena said very little. Patricia said even less. Daniel helped me cover the leftover food and stack the dishes. We didn't talk much. Sometimes you don't need to. At the door, before he walked out, Daniel hugged me again. "Longer this time. I'm going to figure this out, Dad," he said. "The debt and everything. I'm going to handle it properly." "I know you will," I said. "Are you going to be okay here tonight? Alone?" I looked back at my house, at the kitchen where Margaret's recipe card was still on the counter, at the hallway leading up to the room where the rocking chair sat by the window. "I'm not alone," I said. He understood what I meant. He squeezed my shoulder once and then walked to the car. I stood on the sagging left side of the front porch and watched them drive away until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I went inside, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table. The clock on the mantel ticked. Margaret's photograph looked out at me with her kind, patient eyes. I thought about what she had written, about dignity, about the places where love lived. I thought about how she had known, even at the end of her life, that her boy might need protecting. Not from the world, from his own willingness to keep the peace at any cost. That quiet nature of his that came from her, she had understood the risks of it better than anyone. I sat there for a long time. I want to tell you what happened after, because the story doesn't end in that room. Daniel and Serena did not get married in the spring as planned. He called me in January. He told me calmly and carefully that he and Serena had ended their engagement. He said it wasn't one thing. It was a long conversation that had started in the car on the way home from my house that Thanksgiving and hadn't really stopped. He said Serena had told him during one of those conversations that she had never felt like he really chose her over his family, that she always felt like an outsider, and Daniel had told her, for the first time with real clarity, that maybe she had felt like an outsider because she had never tried to belong. There's a difference, he told her, between joining a family and acquiring one. He said she had cried, and he had been sorry for her pain, but he had also known, in that moment, that he had been trying to love someone in a way they didn't want to be loved, and that was no way to build a life. He also told me something else. He told me that he had gone back and reread his mother's letter 4 times since Thanksgiving, and that each time he found something new in it, a question she had posed, a hope she had expressed, a small piece of her wisdom that he had walked past without fully stopping. She knew me so well, he said. Even at the end, she still knew me. She loved you without condition. I said, that kind of love sees clearly. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, Dad, can I come visit next weekend? Come whenever you want. I said, this is your home too. He came the following Saturday. We spent most of the day just in the house, not doing much of anything in particular. He fixed the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom without being asked. I made soup from scratch the way Margaret used to. We ate at the kitchen table and talked about everything and nothing. In the late afternoon, I found him sitting in the rocking chair. He didn't hear me come to the doorway. He was just sitting there, slowly rocking, looking out at the maple tree with his mother's quilt across his lap, the letter folded carefully in his shirt pocket. I stood there and watched my son and listened to the slow, gentle creak of that old chair, back and forth, like a heartbeat that never really stopped. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked quietly back down the hallway, and I let him have that moment with her. Some things don't need words. I've thought a lot about that Thanksgiving since it happened. I've thought about Serena, and about Patricia, and about the way they walked through my house with measuring eyes. I've wondered about the life that shaped Serena into someone who could look at a dying woman's rocking chair and see only dollars. I don't think she was a bad person. I think she was a frightened one, frightened of debt, of failure, of being looked down on. And frightened people sometimes reach for the nearest solid thing and try to pull it toward themselves, not realizing or not caring that someone else is holding on to the other end. I've thought about Daniel and his habit of staying quiet to keep the peace, a habit he inherited from me, let's be honest, and one I should have helped him break sooner. There's a difference between patience and self-erasure. Margaret understood that. It took Daniel a Thanksgiving and a letter from his mother to understand it too. I've thought about Margaret, about the woman who sat in that chair for 30 years and watched the world move outside the window and loved her family without condition, and at the very end of her life found a way to keep watching over the people she loved even after she was gone. She was wiser than me. She was wiser than any of us. And I've thought about this. We live in a time that is very good at putting prices on things. We know what houses are worth, what antiques sell for, what square footage commands per unit. We are very sophisticated about value, but we have become, I think, a little clumsy about worth. Worth is not value. Worth is what something means, what it carries, what would be lost if it were gone. A rocking chair can be worth $7,000 on the resale market and worth 1 years of evening light and a woman's heartbeat and a little boy sleeping against his mother's shoulder, all at the same time. The first number is just a number. The second is a life. There are people in this world who can only see numbers. I don't hate them for it. I feel sorry for them, because they will spend their whole lives buying and selling and calculating, and they will never know the feeling of sitting in a chair that holds a story, of reading a letter that crosses the border between this life and whatever comes next, of hearing a rocking chair creak in the late afternoon and knowing that love doesn't end. It just changes rooms. Don't sell the things that hold your story. Don't let anyone tell you that what you love is worth less than what they need. And if you are lucky enough to have people in your life who leave letters behind for the right moment, read them. Really read them, because the people who love us never fully leave. They just wait for us to be quiet enough to hear them.